The first announcement over the ship's speakers wasn't about rough seas, it was about missing passengers. "Will Mr. Arthur Bennett please report to guest services immediately?" People glanced around. Some smiled. A little girl tugged her grandmother's sleeve. Maybe he won a prize. I almost smiled too. It was supposed to be my first vacation in 28 years. Instead, it became the day I discovered I'd been erased from my own family. Guest services wasn't crowded. A young employee looked relieved when I arrived. "Mr. Bennett?" "Yes." She hesitated. "I'm very sorry." Then she slid a white envelope across the counter. "No cent. It was left here this morning with instructions to give it to you only after the ship departed." I frowned. My son must have forgotten something. She didn't answer. She already knew. I opened the envelope. Inside, there wasn't a letter, just a single folded sheet. 5 words, "Don't come back." Beneath it, one more sentence, "We don't need you anymore." No signature, none was necessary. I recognized my son's handwriting before I'd even finished reading it. My knees didn't buckle. I didn't cry. I simply looked through the window beside the desk. The shoreline was already disappearing. The city looked smaller every second. So did the life I'd spent 43 years building. My name is Arthur Bennett. I'm 71 years old. For most of my life, I repaired elevators, not glamorous work. Nobody applauds the man who keeps buildings moving. But every evening, people made it safely home because men like me showed up before sunrise. My wife, Linda, used to joke, "You spend all day lifting strangers." Then she'd kiss my forehead. "And every night, you come home and lift us." She'd been gone 6 years. Cancer fast. Cruel. After that, there wasn't much left except my son Daniel. At least, that's what I believed. 3 months earlier, Daniel started acting strangely generous. "Dad, you've never traveled. You deserve something nice." I laughed. "I'm too old for cruises. Nonsense. You'll love it." His wife, Melissa, smiled beside him. "We already booked everything. Ocean view cabin, all-inclusive, no arguments." I actually got emotional. Nobody had ever spent that kind of money on me. I hugged them both. I should have noticed, neither one hugged me back. The weeks before the trip felt different. Daniel insisted on handling everything. "I'll pack your medications. I'll keep copies of your documents. I'll take care of the bills while you're gone." Every problem already had an answer. Every question ended with, "Don't worry about it." I mistook efficiency for love. The morning we left, Daniel drove me to the port. He carried my suitcase, bought me breakfast, even waited until boarding began. Just before I entered the terminal, he hugged me, a long hug, longer than usual. Then he whispered, "Have a great trip, Dad." I smiled. "I'll bring something back for the grandkids." He looked away. "You don't have to." At the time, I thought he meant souvenirs. Now, standing on a ship that was already miles from shore, I finally understood. He hadn't meant, "Don't bother buying gifts." He meant, "Don't bother coming home." The guest services manager quietly cleared his throat. There was one more item left with the envelope. He placed a small envelope-sized plastic sleeve on the counter. Inside was my house key. Only, it wasn't my key anymore. Someone had snapped it cleanly in half. The manager spoke softly. "Mr. Bennett, I think you should sit down." I didn't, because something much colder than panic had already settled inside me. If my key no longer fit, then someone had already gone to my house. And whatever waited for me after this cruise had been planned long before I ever stepped onto the ship. I didn't spend the rest of the afternoon staring at the ocean. I spent it staring at my phone. No signal, no messages, no missed calls. For the first time in years, my son wasn't checking whether I'd taken my blood pressure pills. He wasn't asking if I'd found my cabin. He wasn't making sure I was enjoying myself. Nothing. It wasn't silence, it was confirmation. That evening, the captain hosted the welcome dinner. Hundreds of people laughed, champagne glasses clinked, a violin quartet played near the grand staircase. I couldn't swallow a single bite. Across the table sat a retired school principal named Eleanor. She watched me fold the same napkin over and over. "You've been reading that note for an hour." I looked down. I hadn't even realized I was still holding it. "I suppose I have." She smiled gently. "My husband died 5 years ago. I've learned people only reread painful words when they're hoping they'll magically change." I almost laughed. "They don't. No, they never do." That night, I finally paid for the ship's satellite internet. Expensive, ridiculously expensive. I didn't care. I called Daniel straight to voicemail, Agan voicemail, Melissa voicemail. My oldest granddaughter call rejected. Rejected, not unanswered. Rejected, one by one. Every member of my family disappeared behind the same wall. The next morning, an email finally arrived. Not from Daniel, from my bank. Your mailing address has been successfully updated. I frowned. I hadn't changed my address. Another email arrived seconds later. Online banking password successfully reset. Then another. Your emergency contact information has been modified. My coffee suddenly tasted like metal. Someone wasn't waiting for me to come home. Someone was already living as if I never would. The ship's business center let passengers print documents. I logged into my account before the password changed again. What I found made my hands shake. My pension, still there, savings, still there. But every statement, every tax document, every insurance policy, now listed a different mailing address, Daniel's house. Not mine. I called the bank immediately. After nearly 40 minutes, a fraud specialist answered. Mr. Bennett, can you confirm your current address? I gave mine. There was a long pause. I'm sorry. Our records show your residence was sold last week. I stared at the phone. Sold? That's impossible. I live there. Another pause. According to the closing documents, the property owner authorized the sale personally. I never signed anything. The woman stopped typing. Mr. Bennett, the signature on file matches perfectly. My stomach turned, not because I believed her, because I suddenly remembered something. 6 weeks before the cruise, Daniel had arrived carrying a thick stack of papers. Dad, the travel company needs extra emergency forms. So does your insurance. I highlighted everywhere you need to sign. I hadn't read them. Why would I? He was my son. I signed every page, every single page. I rushed back to guest services. The manager recognized me immediately. I need a printer and a scanner. As many sheets of paper as you've got. Within minutes, the tiny office table disappeared beneath contracts, account statements, botry, records, closing documents. Then, I found it, the deed transfer. There was my signature, or something that looked enough like it. But one detail caught my eye instantly. Every page used my full legal name, Arthur James Bennett, except one, the most important page. It read Arthur J. Bennett. I never signed that way. Not once in 50 years, not on my marriage license, not on tax returns, not even birthday cards. I always wrote my entire middle name. Always. Someone had copied my signature, but they hadn't copied me. That afternoon, I walked into the ship's library looking for a quiet place to think. Instead, I overheard two women talking. My daughter's a real estate attorney. She specializes in elder fraud. The words hit me like a wave. I slowly turned. One of the women looked up and smiled politely. Can we help you? For the first time since boarding the ship, I didn't feel like a father. I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like the elevator mechanic I'd been for 43 years. The man whose job depended on spotting the one tiny mistake everyone else overlooked. I sat down beside them, placed the forged deed on the table, and quietly asked, would your daughter know why the people who stole my house forgot to steal my signature? Her name was Catherine Morales, 64, real estate attorney, on vacation with her sister. She read the first page, then the second, then the third. By the time she reached the forged deed, she wasn't smiling anymore. She quietly asked, Mr. Bennett, did your son insist on arranging this cruise? Yes. Did he prepare documents for you to sign before you left? Yes. Did he tell you not to worry about reading them? I nodded again. She closed the folder. I don't think this was a family misunderstanding. I think you were intentionally removed. The next morning, Catherine introduced me to another passenger, Martin Ellis, retired fraud investigator, 40 years with the state's Financial Crimes Division. He didn't begin by asking about emotions. He asked for dates. What day did you board? When did your address change? When was the house listed? Every answer narrowed his eyes further. Finally, he pulled out a calendar. Arthur, your house was listed for sale 11 days before your cruise even departed. I stared at him. What? He turned the calendar toward me. They didn't decide to get rid of you after you left. They needed you gone, so the buyers would never meet the real owner. For the first time, everything fit. The surprise cruise, packing my medications, handling my mail, taking my house key, changing my address. Every kind gesture had actually been preparation. I hadn't been given a vacation. I'd been professionally removed. Catherine leaned forward. Do you have any relatives you completely trust? I thought for several seconds, then smiled. My younger sister, Margaret. I haven't asked her for help in years. Good. Call her. Margaret answered on the second ring. Arthur, I thought you'd be somewhere drinking fancy cocktails. Instead, I asked one question. Can you drive past my house? Silence, then. I'm already outside. My heart stopped. Why? Because something felt wrong. What do you see? Another long pause. Arthur, there's a for sale sign, but that's not the strange part. What is? She inhaled slowly. A young couple is moving furniture inside. They already have the keys. Catherine quietly took my phone. Margaret, my name is Catherine Morales. I'm an attorney. I need you to do exactly what I say. Within 30 minutes, Margaret had photographed everything. The moving truck, the realtor's signs, the license plates, the lockbox. Even the closing company's paperwork sitting on the kitchen counter through the front window. She emailed everything immediately. Martin smiled for the first time. They're making mistakes. Then, the biggest mistake of all arrived. Daniel called. Not me, Margaret. He sounded irritated. Why are you at Dad's house? She answered calmly. I was checking on it. You don't need to. We've handled everything, she asked. What do you mean we? Daniel sighed. It's complicated. No, she replied. It's actually very simple. Arthur never sold his home. There was silence. Then, Daniel said something none of us expected. It doesn't matter. The deal's already finished. Martin immediately held up one finger. Keep him talking, Margaret did. What deal? Our lawyer handled everything. You'll see. Dad isn't coming back. Click, he hung up. The library fell silent. Martin slowly smiled. He just admitted he expected you to disappear permanently. Catherine nodded. And if there's a recording? Margaret laughed softly through the speaker. There is. Arthur, I record every phone call. For the first time since I stepped onto that ship, I wasn't looking at what I'd lost. I was looking at the first crack. In the story, my son thought no one would ever question. And back on shore, a judge had just signed an emergency order, not against me, against anyone attempting to transfer, renovate, refinance, or occupy my home. Until the real owner returned, Daniel still believed he'd won. He had no idea the cruise he'd used to make me disappear had given me something he'd never expected. Time to uncover every lie before I ever set foot back on land. The ship docked 9 days later. Most passengers hurried toward waiting families. Some carried souvenirs, some carried suntans. I carried a folder thick enough to end a lifetime of lies. Catherine walked beside me. Martin was just behind us. Neither one had planned to spend their vacation helping a stranger. Yet there they were, waiting until my feet touched the dock. We're not finished yet, Catherine said. No, I answered. We're just getting started. A sheriff's deputy met us at the terminal, not because I was under investigation, because the court had already issued an emergency order while we were still at sea. No one was allowed inside my house until ownership was determined. The moving truck was gone. The buyers had left. The front door stood sealed with bright legal notices. I looked at the place where Linda and I had planted our maple tree 40 years earlier. It was still there waiting for me, unlike my son. Daniel arrived 20 minutes later, not running, not crying, annoyed. Dad, you're making this way bigger than it needs to be. I looked at him. Bigger? He pointed toward the house. You weren't using it. I was. You were living alone. Yes, it made more sense for our family. Our family, I repeated. I thought I was your family. He looked away. Melissa finally spoke. We have 3 kids. We needed the space. I nodded slowly. So you decided? I didn't. Daniel threw up his hands. We weren't stealing. You would have left it to me eventually. So we just... He stopped talking. Catherine finished the sentence for him. Decided to take it while he was still alive. The silence that followed was louder than shouting. The judge scheduled the hearing 3 weeks later. The courtroom was packed. Not because I was important, because stories like mine had become painfully common. The forged documents, the fake signatures, the pressure placed on elderly parents. The prosecutor called it exactly what it was. Elder financial exploitation, not a family disagreement, a crime. The real estate company testified. They had relied on paperwork they believed was legitimate. The buyers testified. They had purchased the house in good faith. Then Catherine stood. She placed one document after another before the judge. The forged deed, the altered address, the bank records, the recorded phone call. Finally, she held up the little plastic sleeve. Inside, the broken house key. She looked directly at Daniel. People planning a surprise vacation don't snap someone's house key in half. You broke it because you never intended for him to unlock his own front door again. The courtroom became so quiet, even Daniel's breathing sounded loud. The judge ruled before lunch. Every fraudulent document was void. The sale was cancelled. Ownership immediately returned to me. The investigation into the forged signatures continued. As Daniel stood to leave, he finally looked at me. I made one mistake. I shook my head. No, you made hundreds, but only one mattered. You forgot. I raised you. I know exactly what you sound like when you're lying. Autumn arrived. I didn't move back into that house. Not because I couldn't, because I no longer wanted to live inside a place where every room reminded me of betrayal. Instead, I sold it, legally, on my terms, for every dollar it was worth. Then I bought something much smaller, a little brick cottage overlooking the river Linda loved. No empty bedrooms, no echoing hallways, just peace. One afternoon, there was a knock at my new front door. I opened it. Daniel stood there, alone, older somehow, not in years, in regret. I don't expect forgiveness. I know, I just wanted to tell you. I understand now. I waited. When my oldest son asked if I'd do the same thing to him someday, I realized I'd taught my own children that parents become disposable. His voice cracked. I hated hearing myself through him. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said quietly, "Your mother spent your entire childhood teaching you that love isn't measured by what someone leaves you. It's measured by whether they're still smiling when you walk into the room. You stopped caring about the smile. You only cared about what would be left after I was gone." He lowered his head. There was nothing to argue with, because it was true. Before he left, he asked one last question. "Will you ever trust me again?" I looked past him, toward the river where Linda and I used to watch the sunset. Then I answered honestly. "Trust isn't a gift. It's something you build. You spent years tearing ours down. If you want another one, you'll have to build it from the ground up." He nodded, not because he liked the answer, because he finally understood it. People still ask me about the cruise. They expect me to say it was the worst trip of my life. I always smile. It started that way. But somewhere between the ocean and the truth, I stopped being the father who was waiting to be loved, and became the man who remembered he deserved to be respected. The ticket my son bought was supposed to be one way. He thought it would carry me out of his life forever. Instead, it carried me toward the one thing he could never take from me, my dignity.